Ask the Mayor. Your chance to ask the Mayor of Weymouth, Bob Hedlund, questions about the town of Weymouth and or anything else that you have concerns about. Ask the Mayor is pre-recorded. And now, here's Bob Hedlund.
Welcome to another edition of Ask the Mayor. Thanks for tuning in. We look forward to some great questions like we had in our first two segments. So I think this is our third episode. And it's interesting, we are filming remotely today from Antarctica. My co-host, our chief inquisitor / citizen advocate, Jim Melody, complained that it was a little too warm in here last week. So someone has turned the air conditioning on this beautiful March, April day. So it's quite cold, but I hope you're more comfortable this week, sir.
I'm always touched by your personal concern for me, Robert. Thank you very much.
My water is freezing over slightly, but we will get through this segment.
And we are once again honored to be presenting another episode and segment of Ask the Mayor.
Well, I hope you've been good over the last week and ready to get into the questions whenever you are.
Well, so far the feedback from the general public has been extraordinary. We appreciate the positivity and the support, and please, once again, keep those cards and letters coming.
The Nielsens have gone through the roof for WETC, and they're all looking for raises now.
I wish you luck. Here we go. Our first question for Ask the Mayor comes from Mary Conley on Mill River Drive. Congratulations on your election.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Please tell me how to request a street to be paved.
It's going to be a topical issue, I think, now that spring has sprung and we get rocked around with all these potholes that emerge after the winter. And quite frankly, Weymouth streets have not been maintained to the level I would hope, and it's a budgetary matter. We do rely on funding from the state for the bulk of our repaving. We do some repaving from community development block grant monies, and sometimes when we do water mains out of our water department enterprise account, we're able to resurface roads in conjunction with water line work. I'm going to talk maybe more in the show later, because I think you told me we have a couple of street-related questions, but we're going to try to do a more aggressive way in catching up on our street repaving. In the budget that I will be submitting this spring for fiscal year 17, we're going to take a more aggressive approach in catching up on street repaving and even some sidewalk repaving, which we haven't done much of, as you probably notice as you go around town in the last many years. So we can talk more about the numbers on that, but in answer specifically to Mary's question, I encourage her to just notify the mayor's office. Quite frankly, people complain about a particular road. It gets our attention, and we'll review that as part of our normal review when we put together our street repaving list. There's other factors that involve not just the condition of the road, but for instance, if water main or gas main work is scheduled to be done anytime soon, obviously we're not going to repave that street ahead of that underground utility work being done. So that's a consideration. But based on ability to do the work, budgetary-wise, and condition of the road, it's rated based on the condition of the streets, and we'll get on a list, and hopefully if her street, which I do know the location, I just haven't been over there lately. Actually, I may have been over there around Halloween, to be honest with you, but I didn't.
Trick-or-treating?
I can't recall now, yes. I can't recall specifically how bad the road was, but we'll definitely take a look at it, and hopefully if it's warranted, we'll see that gets on the list for this spring. And we do have a very aggressive amount of work that we're trying to do this spring, totaling in roughly, I know that this spring from our Chapter 90 money from last year, about $800,000, we're filing with our budget $500,000 for sidewalk work in this year, which last year I think that number was zero. That was done. And then we expect from the state about $1.3 million in Chapter 90 money, which as much of that 1.3 we'll do this spring or next spring. That's a use it or lose it proposition from the state. You have to do it before the start of the next fiscal year, so that money would have to be spent by next July once the legislature approves that amount. And we're using a little bit of free cash for the sidewalks, as I mentioned, and we're in our capital plan, which is our bonded money, we're setting aside more money for street work than we've done any time in recent history. We're trying to use about $3 million in our bond space over the next 5 years. So that's a long-winded answer, but an overall kind of picture snapshot of where we are on street repaving, which has been a focus of mine.
Well, it's a long answer to a big question because, as you said, I think there's a number of streets that probably could make the list that could require repaving, but I'm going to open up the Pandora's box and make a suggestion to the mayor.
By the way, I appreciate the fact that Mary said, when is my street? rather than when is my street being repaved, she asked about the process. So hopefully there's not too much patience required on her part.
Well, if I had to nominate a street, from my perspective, that I would like to put at the top of the list, not sure the actual name of the street, but the road that goes directly from 3A up to the top of Great Hill is in fantastic disrepair.
Yeah, that is.
And that's just one of the jewels of the crown in our wonderful town, and I think you could use some help.
The good news is we just put a lot of resources into Great Hill. If you notice,
it's amazing. I see it.
Guardrail work,
beautiful,
and actually in our capital plan this spring, we're finishing some of the work on Great Hill. So the good news is Great Hill looks beautiful. The bad news is you're going to get rocked about in your car to get there. But I think that street will. I don't know if that's on the list, but that's another one to take note of because you're right. That's pretty bad.
Well, as we say in the TV business, stay tuned.
Yeah. By the way, I actually had someone tell me they didn't want their street fixed because it's a cut through, and they said if the street was in better condition, they would anticipate more traffic. I've actually heard that.
You get all kinds of opinions when you're the mayor of Weymouth.
Yep.
I wish you well in handling all of them. Our next question comes from Peter Farrell, Esquire, so I presume he's an attorney from Hill Street. His question comes in two parts. What is this administration's philosophy for school funding that elevates Weymouth to the average range of what school districts are spending above and beyond the net school spending requirement? And I'll give you the second part just so you may be able to combine your answer. Should Weymouth families be prepared for another school budget of level or below level service? Thank you for answering this.
Mr. Farrell is a very prolific user of social media and focuses on school issues. He's quite the advocate for school issues. I would issue a challenge to Mr. Farrell if he can pose a question to us at some point during my tenure on the show that's not school related. I don't know if he can do that. He can get a break beyond that focus that he has, but we appreciate the question nonetheless. What was the first part, Jim?
Well, the first part was, what's your general philosophy for school funding regarding that average range? There's been a lot of hubbub about the Weymouth not meeting the minimum expenditure levels.
So my general philosophy is knowledge is good, and we want to educate our children, and schooling is important. That would be my general philosophy.
Outstanding.
But being more specific than that, obviously school funding has been a big issue. It's one of the factors. We talked about this on a previous show. You know, the things that make a community attractive and enhance our property values, et cetera, schools, public safety, and aesthetics and DPW functions, if you will. So those are the three or four, you know, if you break up public safety under the guise of heading of police and fire. I think in this budget, generally, if people look at things in a relative way in terms of where we've been in recent years, I think people will generally be happy who are advocates for the schools. We don't have a specific number yet. Our revenues are fairly flat, so you know the operating side, it's a challenge to see the kind of increases that we would like. But I think folks will be generally happy when we release what our capital plan is for the schools and what our operating budget numbers are for the schools. And hanging out there, too, is we have contract negotiations ongoing with the biggest bargaining unit in the town, which is the teachers. And that's whatever contract resolution we have with them is obviously going to impact things. The bottom line is when you budget, unlike the federal government who can print money and monetize the debt and devalue our dollar in doing so and just run up deficits, We can't do that the same way you can't when you're budgeting for your household. And we can only budget based on revenue numbers. And needless to say, we're not going to hit the targets that some advocates for the schools want to see us hit. But again, relatively speaking, I think folks will generally be happy.
Well, it seems like we're going in the right direction there, and that's obviously a concern
so.
for many folks in the town. On a lighter note, Bob, we're on the cusp of spring, which means baseball is coming our way. We've got the Bruins and the Celtics in the middle of playoff races. Of the Bruins and the Celtics, Danny Antonovich wants to know, Puritan Road, which team do you foresee going deeper in the playoffs? And a sidebar on that one is, how's the Red Sox 2016 season shaping up in your opinion?
Great question. Growing up, I was a big basketball, hockey fan. I can still name the entire roster of the 72 Bruins.
Hey now, Johnny McKenzie?
I can even, I was just in a restaurant. Yeah, he was one of my faves, actually, Pi. I was just in a restaurant with some guys who were younger than me, and the 69 team was up on the wall. And they put me to the test. And they were pretty impressed that I could name even the trainers, Dan Canny and Frosty Forrestal. But if you give me a team photo now, I would struggle to name a quarter of the team. The NHL I've kind of drifted away from once they started expanding to the extent that they expanded. To me, watching a Nashville Predators Carolina game isn't exactly compelling to me.
You can't name
having
players.
Grown up with the rivalries that we grew up with,
the original
and everything.
six.
So I'm not quite as qualified to answer this for Mr. Antonovich as others might be, but I think the Celtics obviously having a compelling, interesting season, and I would say they'll be the story. They will go deeper than the Bruins.
Aha.
They're going to be the surprise.
You heard it here first. And the Red Sox?
I don't know. Become a pessimist. I've become a Dan Shaughnessy type guy. Mr. Negative when it comes to the Red Sox. I watched in wonder and amazement. It was at the 2009 season when they just imploded. And I went to a bunch of games in September. You just expected them to lose. It was just amazing.
Was that the chicken year?
Yeah, it just was amazing. You just expected them to find a way to blow a game. And last year, these absurd signings by Sherrington, I didn't like them when they did it. I didn't understand what the attraction of Hanley Ramirez from a chemistry standpoint was, from being hurt all the time and handing him that kind of a contract. And Sandoval, if you look at his numbers, I'm more qualified to speak on baseball, by the way. So I don't agree with the prognosticators. Many people have picked the Red Sox, experts, Baseball America, these outlets have picked the Red Sox to win the division. I wouldn't be surprised to see us in for another letdown year. And yeah, you got Price anchoring the staff, but go beyond him, and what do we got? We got Porcello got shelled the other day in spring training.
Here comes Clay Buchholz.
And he's going down. But then again, he's that guy that in the odd or even number years, he's solid. Then he gets hurt in the odd numbers years, he's hurt. Even number years, he seems to have a good year. So who knows?
We'll see.
But I'm not overly enthused, and it's a tough division. Toronto still looks strong, pitching suspect. But Red Sox bullpen's going to be lights out, by the way. That's just unbelievable bullpen.
Well, here we go. And speaking of staying within the budgets, of course, I love it.
And you could probably answer him, too, and I would welcome your input, because people don't realize this gentleman was one of the most deceivingly fast and impossibly hard people to cover on the basketball court. Very agile and quick for a big man. And
As you found out one time.
And a heck of a dribbler. Were you a guard?
100 pounds ago, I was a point guard.
Yeah.
But when you add the weight, you go down low. I think that's a rule of thumb.
You'd be qualified to answer the Celtics. What's your opinion?
Well, I think the Celtics are in development, and in a league that's dominated by superstars. We don't have one. I don't predict a very rosy future for the Celtics, but I do agree with you. I think they'll probably go a little further than the Bruins. The Red Sox get under my skin because, per your prior comments regarding the budget and staying within the budget, I love it when, as you said,
have no budget.
Well, the Charringtons of the world, they sign these, $100 million plus free agents, and then they go on and tell you that it's our money, don't worry, but it's really your money, because whatever they spend, they're going to just lift the ticket and concession prices so it trickles downhill. As you probably know, for a family of four to attend Fenway Park or I think it's 3 of the 4 professional sports, we hold the highest ticket for an average of a family of 4 to attend. I think it's the Bruins, Patriots, and Red Sox game in the entire league.
You do the formula, they say that, a ticket, 4 tickets, 4 hot dogs, 4 sodas, 2 beers or something, and it's like through the roof.
And Bob knows for years I was associated with EEI, and we used to give out tickets to people, free tickets, and then be so grateful, thank you so much for those tickets. And I used to snicker and say to them, beware of Greek-sparing gifts, because even if the tickets are free, you're still on the hook for another $250, $300 as far as that experience is concerned. So it's worth it on a lot of levels. So I'm not discouraging anybody from attending those events, but at the end of the day, it takes quite a few bucks to attend one of those. And to be a fan is a lot cheaper, so we'll sit in the cheap seats and prognosticate as we're doing.
I got spoiled as a kid. My grandfather was a union electrician and still had contacts with a firm that actually was the firm that built the lights at Fenway Park. My grandfather worked on that job when they installed the lights at Fenway Park, whatever decade
20s,
that was.
30s?
No, later than that.
No kidding?
Yeah, that was in the late 40s, I believe.
40, wow.
But the firm that did the light work had season tickets, and every once in a while they'd drop tickets on my grandfather, and I got spoiled as a kid, 4 rows behind the Red Sox dugout. So as I got older, I was in for a shock when I used to sit on the bleachers. I go, oh, this is really how it is, So,
well, there's plenty of good seats at all those venues. Get there if you can, but bring
plenty
your
of
wallet.
good seats at Fenway.
Well, now with the Green Monster seats, which I think are amazing.
How do you get those seats, and how do you afford it? That's another issue.
It gets a little tricky. Call Bob's grandfather.
He's not around anymore.
Well, we'll miss him. As we move forward, Bob, Linda McDonald of Laurel Street knows that you've only been on the job for a few short months, but she's getting anxious about how you're going to make good on your commitment during the campaign on how the town looks. And she knows there's a lot going on in Columbian Square, but any other thoughts? You mentioned earlier the aesthetics are a big part of the town's overall appeal and home values. What are your thoughts?
Great question, and she's right in pointing out that that's something I talked about a lot in the campaign. It goes back to, I think, the answer I provided to Mr. Farrell's question, even though it wasn't specifically what he asked about, I expanded a little bit. And I think, the aesthetics of the community are important, affects home values, affects, I think, community spirit, which you've talked about, community pride. And I should give a plug for Community Cleanup Day, which I know WETC will be running some information about. That's coming up in April. When is Arbor Day, by the way? Does anyone know? Do you guys know when Arbor Day is? Anybody putting you to the test?
I think it's April. Alex Trebek, you're putting us on the spot here.
But it's the day before or the day after Arbor Day, so watch for that. We're looking for people to get out, help with the spring cleanup, looking for volunteers. We welcome that, so that was a nice segue for that. But in answer to Linda's question, yes, I'm glad she recognizes Columbian Square. We talked about that. We had a community meeting the past week where we're starting, and we expect by early May. So reruns of the show you'll be able to see if we adhered to that. But we expect to be complete in May for the work that's being done. We're considering that phase 1 in upgrading Columbian Square, getting the parking lot work done, lighting, plantings, new curbing. There's 2 streets we'll be repaving in conjunction with that in the square. But in addition to that, she's asked specifics about street sweeping, I believe.
It's a pretty involved question, but that is mentioned in her delivery.
So, yep, we want to I'm very particular as someone who rides a bike around still and walks. I think we can do a better job in sweeping. We've had discussions with the DPW director about that. One thing he informed me recently is that we are utilizing a sidewalk sweeper, which we have not utilized in the past.
And I'm working really hard. I want to let everybody know.
Actually, it's a piece of equipment. It's a piece of equipment. So that'll be put to use. I wish we had better conditioned sidewalks to actually sweep, but every little bit will help. The parks, I personally went out and looked at a number of little small neighborhood parks that we haven't had as much attention given to them as we should. A couple of those have already been worked on. I think we already went out and worked on Gagnon. Do you know where that is, by the way?
No, but I have strolled by the Birches. It looks amazing.
Well, I have to give the former administration credit because that was something they did in their capital plan.
Awesome.
But that's spending money and building a new park. I mean, on top of the capital work, it's easy to spend money, but you want to maintain what you have, and that's going to be a challenge at Legion this year. And again, some of the other smaller parks where we're not necessarily putting new equipment in, we want to do a better job of keeping them attractive and maintaining them. So that's something we're focused on. And
big doings this week, I know it was either in the Ledger or the Weymouth News, T.J. Lacey was involved with Councilor Haw regarding blight and penalizing businesses who don't maintain their structures.
Yes,
that's a great step in this direction.
Yep,
obviously.
We worked with the council, our new town solicitor, Joe Callanan, and we worked with the council to come up with the language that we think, A, passes constitutional muster, and that will actually be a tool for the town to use in addressing a couple high-profile, examples recently. So there's that. One little thing we're doing in our capital plan, and the measure already went before the council. As you drive around town, you notice these guardrails. We have these white fencing, visible ones on Commercial Street by the power lines, North Street, a lot in North Weymouth. Those, almost all of them are in, decrepit condition, unsightly, unsafe in some instances. And we have a very, very favorable contract that we're utilizing and taking advantage of because it's very favorable. We're actually going to be able to replace every one in the entire town, and that will commence this spring.
Oh, awesome.
DPW is going to do some work around those areas in conjunction with the replacement. So when all is said and done, hopefully this year, I hope they can complete it all this spring and summer, we'll have all uniform guardrails. They will look like the one that has been installed on Great Hill that you've personally observed when you were up there with your wife, I think, watching the sunset.
Submarine races, actually.
Or are you just thinking about what it looked like when you were in high school and doing other things up there?
The last time we were up there, we saw 2 deer, as a matter of fact, roaming around in that big open space.
How many submarines went by in the submarine races?
I didn't see a single one. I was looking to my right instead of straight ahead, to be honest with you, but it was a great
Some of the younger members of our crew are looking at me with a perplexed look on their face when I mention submarine races.
We'll explain it to them after the show. But I think in this case, a little goes a long way. And just these minor improvements from an aesthetic point of view, I think it lifts everybody. And I think it demonstrates that, to your point, there's a lot to do, but we're moving in the right direction.
And I'm probably leaving a few other things out, but, we're trying to get DPW really focused on this. And, I've talked about a lot of silly things, even, crooked, the poles that are up on top of the rods that stick up with the flag over hydrants that are crooked, and
Sure.
Folks were looking at me like I had 3 heads when I mentioned that one last year.
I think I painted the fire hydrant in front of my house myself, as a matter of fact, because I just thought it looked like crap. I think there's a lot of things.
I know, and I heard about that. They weren't happy that you chose pink for that.
It's my daughter's favorite color. What can I say? Bob Dick Gould wants to know his.
You're getting a sign. I think we want to maybe save that one for the next show.
Then why don't we segue into?
I think you had your big. This is his big shining moment of the show.
Well, it's called formatting the show, and I think it's important. Per one of the goals of your administration and this program is to highlight all the good things that are happening in this town, because there sure are plenty of them. We speak to some of them, and another way we can address that is by highlighting our Citizen of the Week and our Business of the Week. So I'm going to take the ball first with the Citizen of the Week. A lot of folks are familiar with a legendary broadcasting figure who's made his way to international acclaim, and of course I'm referring to
Danielle Niles.
We'll get to Danielle at some point.
Okay.
But Bob Newmeyer is up first, and I think this was the most interesting
When do we
thing.
get to Hal Holbrook?
He's on the list too. Depends on how many shows we're going to do. I think that's second season stuff. But Bob Newmeyer's real first name is Robin. Bob, I think you still have relatives. Robin. I thought that was a great fun fact about Bob.
That's a very good bit of trivia.
But for those who don't know, Bob's an American sportscaster for NBC Sports and Comcast Sportscast New England. He specializes in thoroughbred horse racing. And he's, of course, originally from Weymouth. Bob's a 1968 graduate of Weymouth High School, is a 1972 graduate of Syracuse, and he has a Bachelor of Arts degree in television and radio. But for almost 20 years, Bob was the weekend sports reporter at WBZ in Boston. He served as play-by-play commentator for the Boston Bruins on BZ Radio and has been on ESPN a number of times. But I think from the international perspective, Bob's covered the Tour de France for CBS. He's covered the Kentucky Derby.
You know what his specialty is?
Well, horse racing and call
right.
the horses is at the top of the list, but his hockey expertise should not be denied either. Bob's been affiliated with so many different media outlets, all the major ones, but he's also reported from the Athens Summer Olympics, the Turin Olympics. He's been around the block in a way that most folks dream of and been involved in a fantasy industry that a lot of guys and gals are attracted to these days, and by that, of course, I mean sports and entertainment.
And I have to give a shout out to his brother, Mark.
Oh, wow.
Who's an old friend of mine.
Excellent.
And I met Mark Sunday morning softball league. We were a very strong force. And we had some arch rivals from Weymouth, where there were some teammates of the Weymouth team who are our arch rivals that you're friendly with.
Tony Jacks?
Nope. Mr. Antonovich was one. Mr. Yapper.
Oh, Yapper.
Eddie
The
Giblin.
legendary win. We'll have to do Yapper at some point.
There was a whole bunch of guys I know, your contemporaries, but they used a field in Cohasset as their home field, unfortunately. But anyway, Mark Neumeier was a pitcher for our team. Great ball player. When he wasn't pitching, we'd have him at second base. And he came down with Steve Blast disease in the midst of championship finals round. You know what Steve Blast disease is?
Tell us more.
Steve Blast was a pitcher for the he played for the Pirates and the Cardinals, and at one point in the World Series, I think it was when he was with the Pirates, all of a sudden he couldn't throw a strike. And Mark, all of a sudden, he just couldn't throw a strike in the midst of this championship round, and we moved him back to second base. But great teammate, great guy. And his parents, Ed, and I'm forgetting his mother's name, great people. They used to come to all the games.
Oh, awesome.
So we kind of had, growing up, playing with him, we knew he was a little bit of a celebrity because he had the older brother that we'd see on TV.
Well, and I work with Bob at a couple different stops, and I'm here to tell you he couldn't be a better guy, and they're all tall. They're as tall as you are. Bob was like 6'2".
Is he really?
Yeah, it was his brother that tall.
But it was hard for me to see how tall he is when he's sitting at the announcer's table.
Well, we segue from the Citizen of the Week, of course, to the Business of the Week, Bob. Who are you
going to give a shout out, Electro Switch.
Oh, dynamite.
Keeping production jobs, haven't been outsourced yet.
Bravo.
Like Carrier Air Conditioning, like Nestle, or I should say like Hershey,
wow.
like Levi's.
Yeah.
Like Nabisco just moved a plant to Mexico. They're keeping production jobs here, giving a nice wage to folks in Weymouth, and it's a great company, and I thought of them because I've been using their mug here. So a shout out to Electro Switch, keeping jobs in America, keeping jobs local, and it's tough for them to compete with some of the stuff that's outsourced.
They've been in business for a number of years. And
great community participation on a lot of fronts.
Outstanding. Before we wrap up this edition of Ask the Mayor, we thought it was appropriate to give a plug for our good buddy Steve Riley, who runs Weymouth Recreation. Steve just released not so long ago the summer guide for Weymouth Recreation activities. And if you have a child between the ages of 3 and 15, this is a winner on 1,000 different levels. I don't know how familiar you've gotten with this program offerings, but from Eska Park to Wassagusset Beach to all kinds of fun stuff going on. Take a look online and register your child.
And next show, we can talk about some improvements they're making at some of their facilities, too.
Awesome. Steve's doing a great job and a hell of a nice guy. Any final thoughts as we look to wrap up this edition of Ask the Mayor?
See you next week, next month, whenever it is we're going to be on.
Outstanding. And of course,
and watch for the scroll. Send us your questions, please.
Please do. And your nominations for Citizen of the Week will be important too. Anybody that you know of who's doing something positive and successful on any level of industry, but let's celebrate that person and give them a salute relative to the Ask the Mayor programming. So we close off another edition of Ask the Mayor by saying, stay tuned for McHale's Navy.
If you have a question, please email the mayor at askmayorbob@gmail.com. That's askmayorbob@gmail.com. Maybe your question will be answered on the next episode of Ask the Mayor.